Hello and welcome to Steam Powered PD. I'm Kern Kelly. Today is Thursday, April 16th, and today we're going to talk about image editing. If you take images and you want to be able to manipulate them and add and subtract different components to them, we're going to use an app called PhotoPea or PhotoPea, and that's a free app online you'll be able to use to edit those images and add all kinds of different effects to them. So here are the steps to do that. Step number one, we take a photo. Now, on a laptop, there's a number of different ways we can do that. I'm going to present my screen here. Okay, so if I just go to google.com, I'm going to type in Chrome camera. You can use many different apps if I want to take a picture with my phone or a picture with webcam, but this one's built right in so that every student already has this automatically with their Chromebook. So if you wanted them to take a photo of something, this is built right in. I can launch the app. I have it up right here. So here it is. So I can take a picture. Now that picture, if I want to download it, I click on this little up-down arrow right here, and it'll ask you where I want to save it. In my case, I can save it right to the desktop, or if you're on a Chromebook, you'll save it right directly to your downloads folder. Once we have that, I'm going to upload it into this website called PhotoPea. Now, it's PhotoPea. It is a free website. It's a free app. And how they pay for it is with the advertisements over here on the right side. It's usually very unobtrusive. I've never found an issue with having that sitting there with students or whatever. The one thing that's worth noting, however, is you're not saving anything on the actual app itself. It's really important that when you want to work on something later, you have to save it and download it to your computer, either your Chromebook or your PC or whatever, and then pull that up again later to edit it. One thing we're used to, especially students are used to in Google Tools, is that it pretty much saves automatically every few minutes. This will not do that, so we have to be mindful of that. How they make their money, obviously, from advertisements, you can buy, I think it's like a $10 license a month or something like that if you want the same thing without advertising. This is a super handy program. It's not as fully featured as, say, Photoshop, but it usually does 90% of what 90% of people need. It'll probably do everything that we need for today. So using this app, if I want to edit this image, I'm going to click on Open from Computer. Go find my image I just took a picture of. Loading, here it is. Okay, so this is one that I had taken earlier. I want to use this picture specifically because we're going to do a thing called selective color. And what that means is one color will go through, well, the rest of it will all be black and white. And the reason why, you've probably seen these pictures before, you know, the little girl holding a sunflower and just the yellow sunflower is colorful, everything else is just black and white, or, you know, a little boy holding an apple, that kind of thing. The reason why we use this with our students to be able to learn how to do this is that it teaches layers. Most image editors are filters, and that means that it changes the entire image at once. With this, you can actually split it up in layers. And how I describe to my students is, if you have a picture like this and you put a transparency on top of that, I can draw on top of the transparency. It won't affect the picture behind it, but it will look like, if I look from afar, it will look like it's part of the same picture. And that ability to do that, to have those layers and kind of have them meld together, is a really crucial part of, you know, a little bit higher level image editing. Again, Photoshop uses that, as well as right here, this app itself. So I have my image here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. Now, if you notice on the right side here, it says background layer. That's my layer. I only have one right now. I'm going to click Layer, Duplicate Layer, and now I have two, background and layer one. I can tell which layer I'm on because these little white dashes are around it. That's really important as you go forward, because as you get more and more layers, you'll really need to make sure you're on the right one. I can also hide them. If I click the little eyeball here, that will hide the layer. Now, this checkerboard, this kind of gray and white checkerboard, represents transparency. So if you've ever seen an image online where it doesn't have the white box around the actual square picture, it just looks like a see-through, that is transparency. That's alpha channel that's allowing different parts of the image to go through to be transparent. You'll see these all the time as GIFs or, you know, whatever it is. And so in this case, we're going to turn these on. Now, my top layer right here, I'm going to change that to black and white. So I'm going to take that layer, go up to Image, Adjustments, and Desaturate. Saturate means add color. In this case, we're going to desaturate to remove color. So I've got my top layer right here with no color in it, just black and white, and the bottom layer right underneath it with full color. Again, they're exactly the same except for the color. So I'm then on the top layer here going to use this eraser tool. Over on the left side, there's a tool right here. Click on that. Now it's a very small eraser tool. It looks like I'm drawing on it, but I'm actually erasing through it. I can show you. I'll hide the back layer, and you'll see here what I'm doing. I'm actually erasing part of the top layer, but because it is, the background gray layer is exactly the same, just colored, it looks like I'm coloring on it. Now, this is a very small circle. I want to make that brush a little bit bigger because it's really hard to do that entire thing. If I go up in the upper left, this brush, I click on the little down arrow here, and I can resize it. I can make the size bigger. You notice here I can make this box a lot bigger if I want. I can also adjust what's called the hardness. And basically, is it like if you think about a brush tool, what does that look like? Is it a really hard brush like a pencil or like a marker, or am I using a brush that's a lot fainter? In this case, I'm going to keep it at 100%. And now when I start drawing on this, you'll see again, it looks like I'm actually drawing it, but if I hide the background layer, I'm just deleting portions of it that I want to come through. My nice blue shirt here. Other options I have besides deleting, besides just hand drawing it that way, these selection tools in the upper left right here. Here's a square selection tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. If I want to zoom in here, I'm going to use the navigator. This is this nav button over on the right side. Another way to get there, if I click Window, Navigator. That way I can zoom in and zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, use this red box here to move around. Now I can use this selection tool as I have right here, and that works. I can select an area and click delete. And that works. The problem is, again, it's not the perfect tool for this because I've got a lot of, curved edges here. So it's going to take me a long time to do it square by square. So I'm going to show you another tool here, another selection tool. Right below this rectangular selection tool is, it looks like a lasso. Now the lasso I can draw, but if I'm using my, my touch screen, or if I'm using a touchpad or a mouse, whatever, it's a little bit hard to do that unless I have like a pencil. So I actually prefer, if I hold down, click and hold down, the polygonal lasso tool. And why I like that better is if I click on the edge here, I can click and just let go, and I can just keep making closer and closer. So that's just a little bit easier to handle, so I don't have to click and hold it. I can let go and come back to it. And if at any point I want to double click, it will select, it will like draw a straight line to that. And now I can delete that edge, and you'll notice here, oh, that looks much better. And let's keep going again. Let me do another double click here. And again, what I'm really doing here, and I'll double click, what I'm really doing here, so that's looking better all the time, is I'm deleting from this top layer up above here. One final tool, and I usually wait to show the students this one because this sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. This one's called the magnetic lasso tool, sometimes the magic wand tool, magnetic lasso tool. And so right here, see, I've got like a grayish background for my wall behind me, and I've got my shoulder here. So this one should work okay here, where it's actually going to follow my shoulder to select me. Now it did that, but also notice if I double click here, also notice it selected up the wall here. And the reason why it did that is because anywhere there's a difference in contrast, so really dark to really light, the magnetic tool is going to be like that. So I'm not going to use that one right now. We'll use that in a minute. I'm going to probably use my eraser tool, make it a little bit smaller here. That will probably be, in this case, the quickest way to go. Let's just really quickly get that all erased so it looks okay. Whoops. Anytime if I make a mistake, notice I made a mistake here, I get a little bit of my neck here. So if you hit Control Z or undo, it will just undo, if I can draw, undo the last thing that you did. So at any point, if you made a mistake. Okay, we're almost there. I'm going to jump back to this polygon tool. I think that one's probably the quickest tool to use in this situation. I can just really quickly click across. It's also worth mentioning that you can go outside the actual canvas. So if you notice, I went down a little bit beyond. So actually, that's a really good view here. See how it's a little bit gray at the bottom here? But I could click and go beyond the canvas and then come back in, and it will let me select that. So I definitely have the edge here. All right, we just got a few more clicks to select my shoulder here. That looks pretty good. Double click, hit delete. Again, I could take as much time as I wanted to really make sure it's perfect. I'm just going to call it there. Probably do a little bit right there, and probably call it good. Okay, let's zoom out again. That looks pretty good. I guess that shoulder looks a little bit right there. Excellent. So it looks like it's all black and white, and I've got a colored shirt. Now, again, what's really happening here is I have two layers. One is just a regular colored picture, and one is a black and white layer on top of it that is just showing that through. So it's almost like you have a cutout, and you cut it out physically and laid it on top of it. That's a pretty cool effect. Let's keep going. Now, if I wanted to use on the top layer here, if I want to use that magnetic lasso select, I'm actually going to select myself. And the reason why we're going to do here is, again, I'm just dragging it around. And again, it can tell right there the difference between my shoulder and the actual wall, because it's the contrast of those colors are so different. I'm going to just follow along. The reason why I usually hesitate to show this to students initially is because it's very finicky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I get them worried about getting too frustrated with it. You have to be really careful and delicate as you're going through. So I'm just going to keep selecting around me. The reason why I'm selecting around, we're going to do a new type of, one more click here. Okay, and down at the bottom here, now I'm going to double click and it's going to select right across. Oh, see, it missed the bottom. We'll look at one other thing we can do here. I'm going to use the selection tool, the rectangle select. And if I push, again, on a Mac or PC, it makes a difference. I can hit the shift and I can actually add more selection tool to the existing one. If I hold shift down on a PC, I believe it's the same on a Chromebook. On a Mac, it may be different, but that way I can actually add more to my original thing. So if I look at this right here, I'm just selecting around myself, and I'm going to copy layer and duplicate this layer as well. So now I have two layers here. And what we're going to do in this case, if you look at on the right side, I have three layers. I have a layer 1 copy, layer 1 in the background. We're going to affect what's called portrait mode. And you've seen these images before. Sometimes you take them to your phone, where you take a picture of somebody and adds it as an effect where it'll have the person in relief. It'll look like they're perfectly in focus, and then the border around them, their background is kind of fuzzy a little bit. And really it makes it stand out. Well, that's just an effect that the computer is doing the work of deciding where somebody begins and ends. In this case, we did it by hand. But now in this background layer right here, I'm going to make the rest of this border here be a little bit fuzzy. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if you notice here, I've just selected, I'm going to hide all these, you can see that. I'm just selected myself. Well, I need to select everything else but myself. And the reason why I do that is it's going to highlight everything else, so I can make that a little bit blurry. I'm going to click on select and inverse. And that is now going to select everything but me right here. So you notice how I've had the dashed borders around there. Now on that layer, layer 2, go back up to layer 1 here on the very top, and I can now make that be actually be a little bit blurry. So I'm going to go up to filter, blur, and I'm going to use a thing called Gaussian blur. Now the reason why I like Gaussian blur here is I can adjust how blurry do I want it. Do I want it totally blurry, where I can't even tell what it is anymore, or do I want it just a little bit blurry? And most likely you're going to want it, maybe 7 or 8, because you want them to be able to tell there is something behind you. Let me click OK. That there is something behind you, but it makes it look like you stick out even more. Now, if you notice here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. If you notice here, I missed a part of my ear when I was doing that selection tool. But here's the deal. Over on the right side, it's the top layer that's blurry, right? So I can use that same eraser tool. And if I start to erase these pieces right here, then it's going to go through to the other side, and we'll be able to see. Let me do it, not quite as much as that. There we go. I'll be able to see through it, erasing it. Again, if I look at it this way, this is what I'm actually doing. I'm erasing that top layer to showing that sharpened back layer underneath it. And these are some of the effects that you can really get that are really cool. We kind of take them for granted now that they're kind of built into our phones for some of our image apps. But this is the kind of stuff that you can do right with this web app, PhotoPea, which is super handy, super cool. This is just a nice effect. It's kind of a cool picture. The last thing, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important about saving this, because this will not automatically save. If I exit out of the Chrome right now, my browser, it would kind of go away. So I want to make sure I save it. If I click File, Save as a PSD, that's a Photoshop file. That is a file that will maintain all of these layers. These layers over here on the right side that we talked about, those will stay separated. If I want to come back and work on it tomorrow, I would want to make sure I save it as a PSD file. And that PSD file, I would label it, name it correctly, and then I would make, I pull back up in here. That's a good thing. The drawback of a PSD file is if you sent that to somebody, if you email that file to somebody, if they don't have a program to run it, they won't be able to see it. They won't be able to do anything with it. So most common is what you're going to do is you're going to click File, Export As, and either a PNG or a JPEG. Now a PNG or a PNG is a high level, usually a high quality graphics image. And that's what you use probably most of the time. If you're worried about file size, if you want them smaller, but still pretty good graphics, pretty much very comparable to a PNG, is called the JPEG. So JPEGs are a little bit smaller, and as far as they're a little bit smaller size-wise, as far as the file size goes, and the quality's good. PNGs, the quality is very good, and they're a little bit bigger. There are other options that are even bigger, that are even more, like RAW or TIFF, which are basically lossless. So you have very big files and they don't have any compression in them. But most of the time, probably 90% of the time, I would either use one of these two. One thing to note is you'd use the PNG file if you needed to keep transparency. So for example, if I wanted, let me jump back here for a second. I'm going to use the ellipse selection tool. So I'm going to put a circle around me. And if I wanted to select inverse again, let me select inverse, and I'm going to delete from every layer. So I just have my background like this. So it's just a circle now. Now you notice I have that checkerboard around it. If I wanted to save that transparency in my image, so it'll just look like a circle, I would want to make sure that I save it as a PNG. And that way I click save as PNG, width and height, that looks good, quality, that's fine. I just click save and it would save it right directly to your, your downloads or to your desktop or wherever you tell it to. The last tool I'm going to share, and this is a different tool, but this is one that we mentioned in the show. It's called remove.bg. Now, when we talk about machine learning and all these images that people are collecting, Google and Apple and Amazon and so forth, what are they doing with this information? This comes back to that idea when you see, I'm sure you've all seen, you've gone to a website and it says, hey, which of these images are a crosswalk? It'll give you like a grid of 9 images. Which of these things are a traffic light or that kind of stuff? We are basically teaching the machine learning to say, this is what a crosswalk looks like, and this is not. This is what a bus looks like, and this is not. This is what a traffic light looks like, and this is not. So what you can do with that kind of stuff is something like this. I can upload an image right here, and this is free and right basically online. I can go find that same image I had earlier, and here it is. Now, this did all the work for me. This actually, using machine learning, said, okay, I can tell where a person is and where a background begins. That is incredible amount of computing and really amazing. I mean, again, the amount of work that we just did by hand. Again, it seems obvious, like, what's the big deal? I can just select around you. You and I can do that, no problem. But for a computer to know where my arm ends and where the background begins, to be able to tell the difference between my shoulder and this curtain here, that's a big deal. That's actually a really difficult thing to pull off. So it's pretty impressive that they have that as a free service right now. And I can use that and I can download that and I can do something with it or whatever. So that was the extra credit tool for the day, remove.bg. Let me stop presenting here. Thank you all very much for joining us. This was a shortened version. The original version, we did the live one. There was an error in the download for some reason. So I just basically reshot this just as a tutorial to cover this topic we talked about on that Thursday. Thank you guys all very much. See you soon.